The experiment continued right in her school. To save the children, she had to enter their collective dream. The substitute reality. The morning was heavy, the air damp as if soaked through with moisture. Carol Weaver entered the classroom and immediately felt the chill seeping through her thin sweater. She rubbed her hands for warmth and with a familiar motion picked up a piece of chalk. On the board appeared the topic, Early American Settlements. A moment later, glancing back, she realized with surprise that she did not recognize her own handwriting. The letters looked foreign, written by someone else's hand. The students came in one by one, the clatter of shoes and scraping chairs filling the room with familiar noise. Wet coats hung on the hooks, releasing the smell of damp wool. Carol walked down the rows of desks and noticed an old inventory sticker on one of the legs. The paper had faded, but the symbol was still visible, an open circle with a dot in the center. Absent-mindedly, she ran her finger over it, and the sticky edge clung to her skin. The lesson began. Carol turned to the class and suddenly caught a strangeness. In the tall window along the wall, her reflection lagged behind. She raised her hand, and only a moment later did the image do the same. She blinked, blaming fatigue. The children had already opened their notebooks and were writing something. "We haven't started yet," she said, but they didn't react. A boy by the window raised his hand. "Miss Weaver, are we continuing today about the house on the hill?" Carol's heart froze. She had never taught a lesson by that name. The rest began speaking at once, confident and in unison. Some recalled the staircase, others the windows, others the red door. Their voices merged as if they had all witnessed the same event. Later, collecting their drawings, she saw every child had drawn a tall house with narrow windows and a chimney. The perspective matched, as though drawn by a single hand. Silence fell over the class. Only a draft carried a strange whisper through the rows. The house on the hill. Carol tightened her grip on the chalk and for the first time felt that the lessons in her classroom might not belong only to her. The next day, Carol entered the classroom, trying to appear steady, though pressure throbbed at her temples. She checked that everything was in place: textbooks, a stack of notebooks, chalk in the wooden box. Her heart beat faster than usual. To distract herself, she tried to dial her mother's number in her head, but stumbled halfway through. Tried again, another mistake. Only on the third attempt could she recall it correctly. A cold shiver ran across her skin. Her memory was faltering. The bell broke her thoughts. Students took their seats, and she began explaining the topic. But the children, not listening, were already writing. In their notebooks appeared words: the red door, the endless staircase, the window that watches. "Where did you get that?" Carol asked. "From your lessons, Miss Weaver," Sarah answered, meeting her gaze with calm certainty. Another boy added, "And also from the book. I got it in the library." He pulled out a battered volume with a faded cover, House on the Hill. Carol carefully flipped through the pages. On the flyleaf was a label, catalogued, Ariadne Consortium. The date, just a month ago. She had known the librarian for years, but had never heard of such an organization. After class, Carol went to the restroom, splashed her face with cold water. She raised her eyes and met her reflection. For an instant it lingered, then smiled slightly later than she did. A faint metallic taste filled her mouth, and she pressed her palm to the tiled wall, feeling its icy roughness. In the teacher's lounge, she cautiously mentioned the strange coincidences. The principal didn't even look up. children's imagination. The internet is flooded with horror stories these days. But Carol knew this was no simple game. That evening, checking notebooks, she again found repeating drawings. The same windows, the same chimney, the same staircase, different handwriting, identical images. She closed the last notebook and felt as though the apartment walls had moved closer. The basement door, which Carol had never opened before, yielded easily this time. She had found the key in her drawer that morning without note or explanation. The stairwell smelled of mold. The iron railing chilled her hand. The lamps flickered, throwing jagged shadows on the walls. At the corridor's end stood metal cabinets. Hinges groaned as she opened them, boxes of tapes and folders thick with dust. Carol pulled one out and flipped through several documents. On the first pages, diagrams, tables, headings, Collective Cognition Project, Memory Induction Trials. Another bore a bright stamp, Ariadne Consortium, Phase 3, Do Not Brief Subject. At the bottom was the familiar symbol, an open circle with a dot. But among the protocols lay a notebook different from the gray files. Inside were not graphs, but words more like ritual fragments. Rite of reflection, mirrors as gates, loss as entry fee. In the margins, sketches of figures, spiral-like symbols. The contradiction glared, science and occult terms lying side by side, as if the project could not decide what it was. Her heart pounded as Carol switched on the first cassette. The screen flickered with static, then a grainy image. A classroom, but the teacher was not her. A woman in her 40s dictated an assignment, and all the children simultaneously drew the house on the hill. Off camera, a man's voice calmly commented, "Subject shows stable engagement, contingent synchronized." Carol shut off the recording. On the case was written a name, Ms. Clark. She had never heard it before. Her stomach dropped. So this could happen to any teacher? Or perhaps she had been brought to the school precisely because the teacher's place had to be filled by a subject. Gathering the documents back, Carol felt the basement closing in around her. The damp air clung to her skin as though guarding its secret. She understood. Everything happening in her classroom had been planned, and the fact that the key ended up in her drawer could not be chance. After the basement discovery, Carol tried to conduct lessons as though nothing had changed, but the class already lived another life. When she deliberately said the house's door was green, dozens of voices corrected her, all except one. Sarah frowned and whispered, "But at home, our doors are white." Her neighbor nudged her. "No, red, remember?" Sarah fell silent, her eyes glinting with fear. Carol noticed the children did not always speak in unison. Sometimes confusion broke through. One said 3 windows, another 4. Yet seconds later, they corrected each other, as if the network pulled the gaps together, fusing them into one version. She clenched the pendant in her hand, her anchor. The metal's warmth should have reminded her of her mother, but the memory was fading. She tried to hear her voice and could not. The drawings also changed. Now the children depicted not only the house, but a mirror at the end of a long corridor. In one, she saw a girl who smiled, but in the reflection, she wept. In another, a boy had drawn himself twice, one standing, the other hanging in emptiness. During recess, she approached Sarah. You still remember your street, don't you? Yes, there's a shop, but it's always closed. Sarah stopped, then corrected herself. No, there's the house on the hill, the red door. Her voice trembled. In her eyes flickered a plea, but her words dissolved again in the chorus. Now Carol knew. The children were fighting, but their reality was stronger. The key was their whisper. When the class repeated, "The red door is always open," the space shifted, and she stood on the hill. The house loomed ahead. Inside, walls breathed with drawings. Children sat on the floor. Some cried, whispering parents' names, but their voices were quickly drowned out by others. No, only the house, only the mirror. The same mouths spoke different words until the network forced them back in line. Carol felt her first memory vanish, the smell of cinnamon in her mother's kitchen. Then a countdown echoed in her mind, one episode erased. She pressed the pendant to her lips, but it gave no warmth. A voice came through a speaker in the ceiling. "You may leave them. We will grant you wholeness. Preserve yourself, or give it all away." Carol stepped further. Another memory dissolved, her father's voice. Emptiness spread. Fear grew. Who was she without them? Panic rose in her chest. Her fingers shook. The children looked at her differently, some with hope, others with empty eyes. Sarah reached out. "Please don't leave us here." Yet at the same moment, another version of her, as if from shadow, repeated, "The house is all we have." Carol understood. The struggle was not hers alone. They too were losing themselves. The mirror spanned the entire wall. In it, Carol saw dozens of versions of herself. One held a book, another a grade book, a third the living, clear face of her mother. Each offered a different path. She tried to pull the children out of the network. "Remember your homes, the smell of bread, your parents' voices." Several lifted their heads, eyes glistening. Sarah whispered, "Mom," but the walls shuddered, the floor rippled, and the network swallowed the memories back. Carol realized the third way was nearly impossible. The house held too tightly. The choice remained. She looked at the reflection where her mother's face still lingered. Her heart clenched. A long pause, fear, longing to escape, and hope. Then she opened her hand. The pendant turned cold, hollow. The image of her mother vanished. The mirror cracked, the house howled. Children's voices rose into a many-layered cry, some screaming in pain, others begging her to stay, others laughing. Rooms collapsed one by one. The staircase crumbled, the corridor twisted, the roof caved in. With each collapse, Carol lost something else. A favorite melody, the childhood schoolyard, her own name. But with each loss, the children returned. Their faces cleared, their eyes came alive. Sarah smiled through tears and whispered, "Thank you." Her image vanished first, as if freedom required complete dissolution here. The house resisted to the end. The chimney fell last, and with it the chorus of voices was cut off. Carol struck the mirror with her palm, and it shattered into thousands of shards. In each flickered a different version of herself. Then all were gone. Silence covered the hill, and Carol dissolved into it, along with the house. School life resumed. Corridors again echoed with laughter, slamming doors, footsteps. In class, everything looked as though nothing strange had ever happened. Children opened textbooks, debated dates, drew maps. Yet one detail could not be ignored: the empty desk by the window. Miss Kendrick, the new teacher, tried to treat it as ordinary furniture, yet her eyes kept drifting to it as if it held another presence. She switched on the new projector, proudly installed by the school. Its case bore a fresh logo, an open circle with a dot, labeled Ariadne. She never considered its meaning. Sometimes children lingered after class. Once, Sarah opened her notebook and wrote the word Margaret. She stared at it, frowning. Why like this, she asked herself, but found no answer. The name was an empty sound, yet stirred a sorrow in her chest. Another boy once drew a woman in a dress, though the assignment was geography. He quickly erased it, but Miss Kendrick caught the outline of a pendant on her neck. In the evenings, when the classroom emptied, the glass reflection would briefly distort. Instead of the familiar interior, a corridor appeared with a mirror at the end. For a second, a woman's figure could be seen, but with a blink, only the reflection remained. The children no longer spoke of the house on the hill. But sometimes, when a draft swept through the rows, someone would flinch as if hearing a familiar whisper. The house on the hill. The desk by the window stayed empty. And in that silence, the school carried a scar no one admitted, but everyone felt.